So here's the thing. If you're always following trends, you're never going to become one. You're only relevant until it dies. If you want to go viral, which is what works on the algorithm right now, pick one replicable piece of content and own it and keep doing it, right? You're going to build an audience super quickly, but then the well is eventually going to run dry.
Right.
So you need to have a number of series that you can go to and you can speak to. And that's why I always harp on the importance of having a mission. Because if you have a mission or a vision of what you actually want to evoke and give the world, then you can find different ways of telling it, right? But if you focus on like one sort of skit or one sort of challenge or game that people tune into to watch, once enough people see it and it starts to become old or you run out of ideas, it's like, I always say it's like the X Games. How much bigger can you make the jump?
It comes back to having an evaluation point for yourself every couple years, every year, every couple months to redetermine what your value proposition is. For guys like us in our 20s, late 20s now that are, you know, have seen different iterations. You were talking about your path or a little earlier, but the iterations of ourselves throughout the years, it changes so much in the 20s that if you don't know what you're selling or the problem to solve for yourself, for other people, it's going to be kind of hard to make content to that end. Because then if you are just doing the trends and following the algorithm, people never really get to connect with you as a person because you're always following whatever that persona might be at the time.
Right.
So then is it a short shelf life at that point because of that?
You hit the nail on the head. So like think about life in terms of like the chapters that we've been raised on. So from middle school and high school, elementary school, let's just use high school and college as an example. It's 4-year increments. So in your 20s, it's 2.5 times the size of high school.
Right.
That decade is 2.5 times the size of high school, which is, think about how much you changed in high school and then college, right? Now you're going to change 2.5 times that in your 20s. So
it's kind of a lot.
It's a lot. And so think about how drastically different you were across there. You're going to be drastically different, but instead your unit of measurement is no longer a 4-year chapter, which you were defined by, oh, he's a high schooler, oh, he's in college. Now you're just in your 20s and you're supposed to have your entire life figured out, right? Or theoretically. And so that's why I always say, when people say, well, you just need to find your niche, I think that's terrible advice because, and I also hate the saying you are the niche, but let's kind of go down that hole. If you just stick to doing what you actually like to do, what you like to talk about, what comes natural and what you would talk about or share with friends around a round table, you will connect with more people like that on the internet. It doesn't need to be a 1 million person audience, doesn't need to be hundreds of thousands. I know friends that have thousands of followers that are making great livings on social media just because their audience is so dedicated to what they have to say, and they've proven to be extremely lucrative whenever they do brand deals. So in reality, if you said, hey, I'm just the algorithm and trying to find a niche, I'm just going to focus on talking about what I like to talk about and what I can continuously talk about, you're going to be in a great position, because anyone that has found a niche right now, I can tell you is actually having somewhat of a midlife crisis, wondering if they're always going to be defined by that niche that they've found.
I think there's a big identity crisis with these solo filmmaker, videographer types that are going out there and trying to figure it out. Do I create a brand, and for me, in my experience with TEDx and, you know, all of the other things, Greenville Film Rentals and the Film Society has always been because there was some sort of problem to solve. We went out and made something because it made sense to bring those resources together with me and a partner to make something, instead of saying, oh, it's a preference thing, I think I'm making something cool with this brand. Because you can make a brand look cool, but if it doesn't serve a mission, and this is a huge part for you, I'm passing it to you, it's not really going to make an impact or, you know, convert, let alone convert, you know?
Yeah, and so I always say, like, what do you connect more with, people or a logo?
For me, it's people.
Always, everyone connects more with
This
people.
is the connection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't look a logo in the eyes. You know, seriously.
That's a really good one.
So
I like that.
So, yeah. But that's what I always tell people. Humans have more than one interest. A brand has to have a very focused interest, right? A brand is created to solve a focused problem, right? Position itself for a certain individual, to service them and further something that they believe in, right? Individuals can have that too, It's just people have more than just one interest typically. So the way the algorithms are right now, it might be harder to scale a persona because there are more interests, and the algorithms are trying to search for like corresponding like feedback loops of, oh, this person really likes this person. And that's why if you start like a specific sort of piece of content, like a challenge or something like that, or a game show, and it keeps going as recurring, you'll grow an audience really quickly right now. But that's eventually going to change because they're going to realize that people have more than one interest. And the issue there is if you build an audience around a game or something like that, and it's Evan Rogers or it's Teddy Giard, and then you're the guy that interviews people on the streets and asks them like if they want to eat octopus.
But could I be more than that? Has to be the question at all times. Like you just said that a minute ago. For those creators, that identity crisis might be, I think you already said it, but like in Hollywood, traditional Hollywood, that was like the shtick for, I mean, imagine being one of the Marx Brothers back then. You were known for being slapstick comedy and then one of those three roles and doing the same kind of stuff all the time.
I mean,
they didn't get straight interviews that much.
No, totally. And I mean, just look at like Robert Downey Jr. Like he's such a good actor, but you always think about Iron Man. And then like what he's made his way out of that typecasting though, to where he can go be in anything and you're like, he is the man. And anytime I see him, I'm fully invested into whoever his character is. And I think that that's the difference, is like a brand shouldn't be molding. A brand should be unified and like should always stand for the same thing. That's why it exists. It is a promise. You don't go back on your word when you make a promise, right? A person should be growing. So the best way to think about it is if you want people to invest in you, have them invest in your journey and your growth. If you want people to invest in your brand, have them invest in the promise that you've made the world.
Wow.
So a brand should be showcasing your fulfillment of your promise, where your personal account should just be self-expression and documentation of how you are furthering your growth in the world. It should be humanitarian and it should be relatable if you really want to amass an audience. Might not be as big as the other ones, but I can tell you that if you communicate naturally like a human, people are going to resonate with that, and that is going to help you further any brand or any touch point that you create in the future. I think the number one thing that's lost with brands is majority of brands don't have a purpose for existing. And most brands, you don't have a purpose unless you've made a promise to the world. And so the reason I used Patagonia as an example in that TED Talk was because Patagonia made a promise and has always, no matter what, demonstrated that they're willing to do whatever it takes to fulfill it. Even put the company in terrible financial situations.
Definitely.
But their mission has never changed. I actually had someone tell me one time that your mission through life should be fluid. And my response to them was, well, it sounds like you've just never had a good mission. Because if you truly have a good mission, it's a purpose and it's a North Star and you align on it. You know, my mission in life is helping people escape monotony. No matter what I do, I want to help people escape monotonous cycles, because I think monotonous cycles are where people get depressed. I think it's where they find lack of purpose. I think it's where they stray away from Christ. I think that you need to break it up. If you look at Jesus's life, it was far from monotonous, right?
Oh my gosh.
So that's my calling, is to help people escape that, because I think when you do that, you get a new perspective. And for me personally, whenever I've broken routine and just been silent, been still, and pursued, that's when the best ideas have come to me. That's when I've really made the moves where I've been like, wow, I didn't think that leaving the gym, praying, and going to a coffee shop that day and writing in my notebook for 2 hours would have opened up 2 business accounts that I've been trying to open for the last 3 years.
Weird how there's a mental block for stuff like that.
Yeah, but right? So all right, here's a good one.
That's crazy.
My buddy Brian shared this with me. He's a aerospace defense in the military. I don't even know what he does. I'm not allowed to know, but He's something like that. But he was telling me that as he was going to yoga class, he lives in California, so he would walk on the beach to yoga class, and he said he would take calls in the morning on the East Coast because the time change. He'd get to class, go into yoga, and then right after class, he'd get on the phone again and take calls on the way back. And he said his yoga teacher stopped him and was like, "Hey, Brian, are you taking calls before and after class?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just optimizing my time. I'm being an efficient individual, whatever." And her response to him was, "If you don't have 3 minutes to meditate, you need to meditate for 3 hours."
Wow. Yeah, it's a full reset on how you, because that's been a big thing for me recently, is trying to prioritize personal. And we've talked about this before, trying to have the balance and not allow yourself to be fully immersed in hustle culture for too long. Like, there's seasons of your life, right? I always talk about this with people now. There's seasons of your life where you know you're going to be in that grind cycle for a certain amount of time. But if you don't know how to resurface yourself and figure out what your daily routine actually is, why the 9 to 5 was kind of created, then there's going to be some identity crisis there. And also what you said, there'll be mental blocks toward, maybe on a spiritual level, right? Why you're not able to reach a certain thing. There's a reason that door's closed at that moment, because you're not giving yourself a chance to reset yourself. I think it's valid especially for storytellers. Let's go back to that point. Whether you're a marketer or you're a filmmaker or you're in some kind of category to that degree, you have the ability to change people's thinking, which is cool, or at least influence it, right? And I think it's important to stick to the narrative that you're building for yourself, as well as the narrative that you're building for your different entities, because those are an acted upon expression from you, even though you're still the core of it. That's why I'm always going out as Evan Rogers, evanrogers.co. That's me.
Yeah,
I
100%.
focus my lead gen and all that on that right now, for the most part. And then everything flows out of it.
And I think that's smart, because I think the whole model of operating an agency or a service that is a catch-all is outdated. It is not scalable, and it is not something that, I think that we live in a world where everyone wants to be specialized right away. I think that you need to be a generalist before you can specialize. But the key to success is specialization, but it's specialization through generalization. Because once you've generalized, you can understand the full picture, and then you can specialize in the pillar that is needed to build the entire foundation. So I think that it's wise to invest in who you are, and then let your services that you offer be very narrow and specific, offer a promise, but have that promise point back to what you want to offer the world. And so that's why you need to understand yourself and understand what you want. Because if you don't understand what you want, then you're just creating things for somebody else, for the algorithm, and you're going to either burn out or never feel like you are properly rewarded. Same reason I ask people when they make content, okay, cool, what was the purpose of this content? Well, it's, I don't know. Was it to gain followers? Was it to get eyeballs, get reach? Was it to get web clicks? Was it to have somebody buy a product? Was it to get leads? You got to go into it with that purpose first, because if you have something to offer the world, drive traffic to it, right? But drive qualified traffic to it. It's not going to be everybody. If you just want to get your voice out there, think about topics that people relate to. Go on Google, see what people are looking up, right? Google will tell you that. But if those don't feel like something that you can authentically speak to, and you don't want to be a news reporter, then don't be a news reporter. We have enough of those. So essentially just talk about what you want to talk about.